Today, Senator Shelley Moore Capito claims the Inflation Reduction Act is funding domestic terrorist groups with taxpayer dollars. Does the GOP really have a black voter problem? BlazeTV host Steve Deace is here to tell you why he doesn't think so. And why are the leftists labeling conservatives weird? And what does it have to do with the Middle Ages? We'll have that and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Friday, August 2nd. Yesterday, West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito made a startling claim during a press conference that the Inflation Reduction Act is funding domestic terrorism.
So we've really been digging into who is getting these massive amounts of grants through the EPA. There's $3 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. That will go for different climate kind of buckets. And in our investigation, we found that a lot of this money that's going out really has little to do with the environment and a lot to do with funding groups that are basically engaged in what I characterize as anti-American activities. They're anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-police, and anti-border security.
The alleged domestic terrorist groups that she is referring to are Climate Justice Alliance, New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, New York Immigration Coalition, NDN Collective, and Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. Now, the Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote about all of these groups receiving taxpayer funds. So here to discuss this is senior editor for Human Rights, veteran naval intel officer, and author Jack Posobiec. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. Now, are these groups domestic terrorist organizations, and how did they get any of these funds?
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Jill. One of the things that groups that we've seen, and particularly that I've tracked in my own reporting in this, is that groups like these will constantly and characteristically fund and funnel funding to Antifa-type groups when they need some sort of operation. So we've seen this in numerous types of eco-justice, particularly in the Pacific Northwest and in California. We've seen a number of times where these will become sort of front groups for these activities that do bleed over into domestic terrorism. We also saw similar with Stop Cop City that was done down in Atlanta, Georgia, where terrorist groups would conduct attacks on police officers and then fall back to claim that, oh, we are just a progressive charity. Now, the idea that they've been getting taxpayer funding honestly shouldn't come as a shock to anyone who's paying attention. We've known for a long time now that the left has been using charity organizations and front groups for taxpayer money, for taxpayer donations, funneling and diverting taxpayer money to what they claim are for progressive causes that, quote unquote, just help society, but actually fuel and fund their own far left wing agenda. We've been seeing this go on since the Obama administration, currently under Biden-Harris. It's obviously just a continuation of the third term of the Obama administration. So this really shouldn't come as any surprise. Also, at the same time, we saw corporate money that was floated to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter when members of Black Lives Matter were burning down inner cities like Minneapolis, like Chicago, like Philadelphia, like New York City, like Los Angeles, even like Kenosha, Wisconsin, where Kyle Rittenhouse was attacked. And so many of these times, in many of these cases, we've seen this money spent and then no actual accounting of where it was and who was receiving it.
I want to talk to you about the Trump assassination attempt and the subsequent hearings that we've had since then, because earlier this week, acting Secret Service Director Rowe and FBI Deputy Director Bate testified before a Senate oversight hearing. Let's take a listen.
Something just very recently uncovered that I want to share is a social media account which is believed to be associated with the shooter in about the 2019-2020 timeframe. There were over 700 comments posted from this account. Some of these comments, if ultimately attributable to the shooter, appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes, to espouse political violence, and are described as extreme in nature. While the investigative team is still working to verify this account to determine if it did in fact belong to the shooter, we believe it important to share and note it today, particularly given the general absence of other information to date from social media and other sources of information that reflect on the shooter's potential motive and mindset.
So, Jack, we hear this, but then we also have the Gab CEO coming out and completely saying something exactly opposite, contradicting what FBI Director Abate was just saying there. And he said, to the best of Gab's knowledge, as of 2021, Crooks was a pro-lockdown, pro-immigration, left-wing Joe Biden supporter. So what do we make of this contradiction between the FBI and what Torba is claiming here?
Well, it's really interesting. And of course, what Torba has put out that we've seen has actually been included with screenshots. We included of scrapes of the account itself, many comments, replies, tweets, or posts on Gab that were sent during this time period, as well as the information notice that he received, that Gab received from the FBI regarding this account. So we know that he's not the one putting it out. It's the FBI who is saying this account is associated with him. Now, regarding testimony, the FBI didn't provide any of those screenshots, didn't provide any of this information, didn't even say which service this was. Was this Discord, where we know he had accounts? Was this some anonymous server? Was it Steam associated with video games? We know this guy was a gamer and had posted something at one point about how July 13th is going to be his coming out, be his masterpiece, etc. And so we still just don't have enough information that the FBI has been forthcoming with. And so it's really interesting to me also, why is it that these other social media companies that may have been receiving information on Crooks and on his social media activity are not being forthcoming about it as well? That's why, by the way, I'm coming to you live from Butler, Pennsylvania right now, where we've been up for Human Events conducting a site survey of everything that's going on here. I think people don't realize just how small the location was, just how small the distance was and short the distance was between that warehouse and where President Trump was standing when the shot took place. This was an easy shot. This was a shot that, quite frankly, my 6-year-old could have made. This was a boot camp shot, we would have said, in the military. And this is something really where the idea that the sniper team was not able to see him because they were not at their post in the second floor building, which would have overlooked the building where Crooks ultimately shot from, the lack of a drone, the lack of a communication. Honestly, the questions just keep raising up. And by the way, I'll tell you, even right now, as of today, we're only about 2.5 weeks out. There's no crime scene that's set up there. There's no crime scene tape. There was one police officer that we saw for the entire fairgrounds, just making sure that no one was really doing anything untoward, but he was just kind of sitting down at the front of the parking lot, and he said, "You're more than welcome to go in."
That's incredible. And the fact that we still don't have any answers, and it's going to be 3 weeks from tomorrow, and we have so many questions still surrounding this. We did see Donald Trump this morning on with Maria Bartiromo talking about Mark Zuckerberg. We want to talk about misinformation, disinformation. Well, Facebook Meta was putting the photo of Donald Trump that we all have seen with his fist raised in the air with the American flag behind him. They labeled that as misinformation, and it wasn't a factual photo. He said that Mark Zuckerberg has called him and said that they made a mistake. But Jack, I want to ask you, we know that the censorship is not going to stop, but will it at least slow down a little bit with this going forward?
Look, it seems like it's slowing down a little bit, but I think what people have to understand that what Elon Musk did when purchasing X was create a cascading effect that's now having a user base reflex when it comes to everyone else on the other social media engines. And what do I mean by this? Well, so if X is the platform that actually allows freedom of speech, then that means that's where all the energy is going towards. So everyone's running to X because whether you're a conservative, whether you're a Trump supporter, whether you're not, you're not going to get censored for posting your opinions there. Whereas on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, which was a massive failure to try to compete with X a couple of years ago by Mark Zuckerberg, have all gone up in flames in terms of this content, that X will always be the place that sets the narrative. And so with Elon doing that, it creates pressure now for YouTube, for Meta, which of course also controls Instagram and Facebook, and then of course TikTok, to also allow more things up there. That's why you're seeing Mark Zuckerberg play this more direct role. That's why you're seeing him apologize. But of course, it's clear that there are people still behind the scenes at all of these locations that are doing this. Look, I looked at the photo that they claimed it was, and then I looked at the real photo. They don't look anything alike at all. We also saw that at Google, they manipulated the search results so that you wouldn't be able to see Trump assassination if you started typing it in. Well, of course, we know that if you're typing that in, if you're a Trump supporter, that's probably a phrase that you've used multiple times over the past couple of weeks. So if it's supposed to be tied to the user, it's supposed to be auto-completing based on your preferences and algorithmically tied to you, then it would know that that's what you were searching for. So if it doesn't show that, that means someone had to manually go in and change it. Now, whether or not this is by policy or whether it's just people that are still hanging out inside the mainframe, they are ghost in the machine, the Deus Ex Machina, as it were, that remains to be seen. But it's very clear that the people of Silicon Valley, well, now maybe Mark Zuckerberg's changing his tune a little bit. We'll see whether that comes down to the Zuckerbucks just here in a couple of weeks when it comes to the election. There are a lot of people that want to continue the censorship and want to prevent us from seeing those incredible and really miraculous images out of the field in Butler, just a few miles from where I am right now.
Jack Posobiec, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be following your work there from Butler, Pennsylvania as well.
God bless.
Steve Deace will be joining us next to explain how Republicans could blow the election by ignoring what's right in front of them. Stay tuned. Does the GOP really have a black voter problem? Our next guest actually thinks it's the opposite. So here to discuss his piece on why the GOP actually has a white voter problem is Steve Deace, BlazeTV host of The Steve Deace Show, which we were just on earlier today. So Steve, tell us, does the GOP actually have a white voter problem?
Yeah. And I just want to say it from the outset, I hate talking about this stuff. Okay. I'm a biblical worldview guy, and race, as we articulate it and argue over it in our culture today, is not a biblical concept. I mean, in God's economy, race is just defined way different than what we do. And so I try to avoid it as much as possible. I think I'm not into white boy summer any more than I'm into white guilt. Okay. Just not my thing, you know. But if we're going to have elections where we're going to just, break it down demographically, if that's the way we're going to roll, then I think we have to be honest about the numbers. And one of the things that I've been mystified by this for decades, and I've just kind of come to the conclusion that that boomers are tired of being falsely labeled racist their entire lives, and so they're just bound and determined to keep pushing this narrative, if for no other reason, just to defend themselves. But if you look at the data, the reality is that with one election, 2008 with Barack Obama, not even his re-election, actually, only with one election, 2008 with Barack Obama, can we actually point to, in this, so far this century, that the black vote was actually decisive in an outcome. Before that, you'd have to go back to 1964 with LBJ, post Civil Rights Act. And then you'd have to go to the first time black voters really made a difference in an American election was when Harry Truman defied the odds and beat Thomas Dewey. And back then, polling was at its kind of proto-nascent stage. And so, and much of black America was still under segregation and having their civil rights violated. So the white media didn't even poll them, okay? And it was always assumed that blacks would vote Republican post Abraham Lincoln. And so what they found afterwards is that a historic amount of blacks voted for Harry Truman after he desegregated the military post World War II. And that was seen as the biggest step forward for civil rights in America at the time since the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments after the Civil War. And so the polling never caught up with that. Other than those three elections, there has never been an election where black turnout's been exceedingly high or been determinative. The highest black turnout rate we've ever had in the country is 13%. We've hit that 3 times this century. Barack Obama did that twice. They're telling us Joe Biden, an 80-year-old white guy who used to be friends of segregationists, did that in 2020. I remain skeptical. Okay, but that's the only time, 13%. And so now there's this huge focus on can we win more of the black male vote? And Trump did very well by most Republican standards with black men in 2020, or in 2020. He got 18% of the black male vote. But here's the problem, okay? Even if Kamala Harris gets Obama level of turnout of black voters, so they're 13% of the electorate. All right, 55% of that is going to be black women. Okay, so if we're talking about 45% of 13% of the electorate, Jill, we're talking about what, 6% of the electorate. And then if we're talking about Donald Trump getting like 25%, which would be a 7-point gap increase, which would be massive and would be historic in modern times, you're now talking about improving by only 7 points with 6.5% of the electorate. That math just doesn't work. And the reality is if Mitt Romney has a turnout of married white women akin to what, if you just look at the data, if he turns out married white women the way John McCain did, because Mitt Romney's the only Republican that's ever won independence and lost a presidential election. That happened to him in 2012. And the number one reason it happened is 4 million whites who voted for John McCain in 2008 did not even vote in 2012. And many of them were women. So if Mitt Romney just turns out white women at the rate John McCain did, he beats Barack Obama despite his continued record high black turnout. And one more thing on this that I think it's important for people to understand is we do have a national election, but really we have 50 state elections. Okay, that are then added up and compiled nationally. If you look at the top 10 states for black population in America, okay, only 3 of them are considered battleground states, and the highest one is Georgia. Well, Barack Obama lost Georgia twice while he was getting this record high black turnout. Okay, most of black America lives in states that either Republicans cannot lose, like Mississippi, or cannot win, like Maryland. Meanwhile, there are married women and white women in every single state and in great numbers. And well, Steve, we can't win the Karens. Republicans have not lost the white women vote this century. They haven't lost married women since 1996. I live in the suburbs. There's way too many Karens there, but they're not what the majority of women in the suburbs are. Trump actually won. Jill, he won white women both times he's previously ran. Let's be honest, if Donald Trump can't turn off white women, then I'm not sure Republicans possibly can. So all he's got to do, instead of getting 52% of white women, if he got 54% in 2020, he'd be president now. And if he does that in November, he'll be president again.
So how does Donald Trump go about doing this for the white women, trying to get their vote, making sure that on November 5th, they are going to show up and vote for him?
I think that we've got to get back to talking about issues. And I think that the Trump campaign, going back to now competing with them or feeling like I wasn't officially on the DeSantis campaign, like I literally worked for Ted Cruz, but I was a DeSantis supporter. So I'm backing the other guy. All right. So I'm looking at their operation from the outside in. And now, I'm all in trying to help him get elected this time. So now I'm seeing it from the inside out. So I've seen it from both sides. And I've kind of, and it could be wrong, but I've come to the conclusion that they believed they were going to run against Joe Biden the entire time. And that the best way and simplest way to beat Joe Biden was just to point out he has dementia. And if we start talking about issues, particularly culture war issues, then that gives the media and the Democratic Party an opportunity to deflect away from Biden's dementia and talk about the fact, well, you guys want to ban all abortions and you want to round up and all those other things. OK, and so I think their plan was, we can, for the first time ever, Republicans can win a personality-based election just off of the basis of Biden's senility. And that was their plan.
That's scary.
It is scary.
Because we know what happens when it's personality versus the actual issues. Every single time.
Yes.
But it's only every time, Steve.
Every time. It's 100% metaphysical certitude of American politics. If elections are about issues, Republicans win. And if they're about personalities, Democrats win. And every election, by the way, was determined by which side did the best job talking about the future. Every single time. And so if this is about Trump's presidency, we're going to win. If it's about Trump's personality, we're going to lose. And that's what the Democrats want it to be about. And I think that the Trump campaign, they went out and got Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita. These are capable people, but they're not ideological people. like the people he ran with before. And I think that he thought that they made the determination they needed to run kind of a less of an ideological campaign and run against Biden as an unpopular president with dementia. And I think now that he's been swapped out, they're struggling with their messaging of what to do because they had this entire battle plan in place. When really, and I've heard people say, well, Trump's trying to just do 2016 again. That's actually what I think Trump should do. That's precisely what they should do, meaning that you're running against an unpopular female candidate, okay, that people do not like, all right, for different reasons. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a spent force and Kamala is relatively new, but she's just a moron and annoying, all right? So in that race, what you would see Trump do is say very disruptive, controversial things like Mexico is sending us all of its drug dealers, rapists, and drug mules, right? But then he would say, and then he would pivot and say, and that's why we're going to build a wall and secure the border so those fiends don't get into your neighborhoods and overdose your kids on fentanyl. Right? See what I'm saying? Yep. What they're doing right now is they're going to the Black Journalists Association and they're talking about Kamala being such a phony and fraud that she's not even truly African American, which is true. And by the way, if you watch that clip, don't listen to what bedwetters on X are saying. Watch it for yourself, and you're going to see Trump is winning that audience over as this is going on. There are portions of that audience that are laughing and clapping to things he is saying. All right? But the problem is, if you leave it there, okay, then when that event is over, their comms team and their messaging is going to say, look at these crazy things Trump says. He hates women. He hates black women, just hates blacks, hates women in general. You see what I'm saying? Your campaign, the candidate can't do everything. He's not God. He cannot be omnipresent. All right. What the campaign needs to do is take when Trump walks in there and disrupt it and disrupts their entire paradigm. The campaign then needs to come in with a message that says, and by the way, the same woman that's a phony and a fraud about what her true ethnicity is and her true racial origin was a phony and a fraud when they made her the border czar and she never visited the damn border. You see what I'm saying? Yep. Is a phony and a fraud who admitted with the administration that just gave Khalid Sheikh Mohammed a plea bargain while there are still how many Americans on day 300 over there that are hostages in Gaza. You see what I'm saying? They need to pivot from his disruption to issues. They're not doing that. And so right now they're off message. And all we're talking about is Trump, the person, and not Trump, the president.
Well, when we come back, we will be talking a little bit more about Kamala Harris taking a page out of Joe Biden's book while the media does all of the talking for her. Up next. The New York Times wants you to know that the Kamala nomenon is real. That's Kamala and phenomenon for you playing at home. In her opinion piece, Michelle Goldberg wrote that she has seen Kamala Harris's fandom up close at rallies, and her, quote, Taylor Swift stardom is very real. These are actual words, Steve Deace, that are coming out of the New York Times. Are we wrong about Kamala Harris's popularity? Please,
I know.
Please add here.
I know Michelle Goldberg, and I can promise you she's wrong. Okay, but what you're seeing here when we got done with our debate coverage here at the Blaze the night of June 27th, and we did our after show, and I said, "There's no way they'll let him remain the candidate. He's gone." And what will come afterwards, whether it's Kamala Harris or somebody else, is going to be a PR offensive that's going to make Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce seem subtle. Okay, so we're in the midst of that right now. It's absolutely over the top. The polls are somewhere from sugar high to psyop. I mean, Kamala Harris up by 13 in Michigan is a psyop, for example. That's just not accurate. Okay, but here's the thing, and why I would say to our side to not dismiss this. Okay, I absolutely think in our messaging we should be dismissing her. I do. Meaning, I don't think we should treat her as a serious candidate in our messaging. They're spending this much effort for her to be seen seriously. I think we should. I think we need to let the American people know this is an episode of Veep come to life. This is not a real person. This is a contrivance. I wouldn't even stay away from the Willie Brown stuff. I'm not kidding you. There's a lot of married women. The idea of another woman getting where they are by sleeping her way to the top with other people's husbands, that's just really a turnoff, man. Okay, I would hammer her on all of those things, but I would take her campaign very seriously. because the quality of the messaging, now no campaign can rise above its own candidate, right? They can't make her, ultimately one night, she's going to have to step onto a stage with Donald Trump in front of 100 million people, and she's going to either be able to execute their talking points or she's going to be the moron we've seen for the last 5 years. One of those two things will happen. But until then, the quality of their publicity operation is very high. It's actually even better than I anticipated. It's better than I thought it was going to be. And I think we need to respect that because they're already going to beat us in ground game. Jill, that's never been a strength of Trump as a campaigner in 3 races. Ground game's not his thing, which means up here, we have to win. We have to dominate in the air war. And we're off message right now while they're doing their charm offensive, and we got to get back on message.
And their charm offensive happens to be a bunch of TikToks that Kamala Harris is out there doing. I know you're a big TikToker, Steve, but like when you look at this, it's they have a lot of the celebrities and the musicians. Everybody's trying right now to go all in to make her seem cool. So is that a strategy that's actually going to work with all the Karens?
It will work if we spend another month like we did in July talking about Project 2025 and some axe to grind and urination contest with the Heritage Foundation over the fact that right after our allies, the Israelis, took out 2 members of the Islamic High Command, this administration in the Hamas caucus cut a deal with Sheikh Mohammed and then just let go a couple of Jordanian illegal aliens that were just touring Quantico, as one does. Because we all know Jordan is just it's just a
hop, skip, and a jump.
Right over the Rio Grande.
That's
exactly.
It.
Okay. And so if we're going to waste the month of July, I mean, I said to Glenn on our network this morning, if you'd have told me 3 weeks ago that I would have come out of the aftermath of the near assassination of Trump thinking we didn't milk that enough, I'd have told you you're nuts. I would have instead 3 weeks ago been fearful that we'd have milked it so much we'd have created a backlash against it. Now it looks like we're politicizing a guy's almost murder, right? But ask yourself this question, Jill. You're smart. That's why they gave you this job. Okay. In the last month, have you seen the Trump campaign talking more about Project 2025 and Heritage Foundation, or the fact that the former president literally is such a threat that he took a bullet to the face from our enemies?
It's not even close, right?
It's not even close. And that's not good. And that you can't stop what they're going to do for her. You can't stop that. You can control what you can control, which is for you now to get back on message, because people don't give a rip what Joseph Gordon-Levitt or Sean Astin think. Okay, what they want to know is what you think, and are you going to fight for them on the issues? Get back to talking about issues.
Well, it's one thing when it's about issues. It's another thing when Joe Biden in 2020 was able to just go campaign from his basement. And it looks like they're trying to do the same thing right now with Kamala Harris. And Chris Bedford, in his latest column for the Beltway Brief, which you can find at theblaze.com/Bedford, Chris was mentioning that Harris's absence, we saw from the National Association of Black Journalists conference. She was at the Sheila Jackson Lee funeral instead. But the fact, she hasn't done an interview since Joe Biden has dropped out. So she did, though, have to talk off the teleprompter. We have that here.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy and strengthening alliances. This is an incredible day.
Every single time that she has to go off prompter, this is what we get. So are we going to see, run it back, Kamala from the basement, basically, unless she's on prompter? Is this the playbook that we're going to see from the Democrats?
Yes. And the clearest tell here is if she was a quality candidate, they would be in much better shape if she were president right now. Okay. The fact that they know she's not electable, here's how you know. That when they were running Joe out of the campaign, they just would have had him resign and put her in power so that the American people could have, before they even voted. I mean, imagine if you could test drive a car off a lot.
I think they're holding that in their back pocket right now.
Maybe. But the fact that they don't want to give her a 90-day preview with the American people of what life with Kamala as president is like indicates they know that she would not pass that test. So the Trump campaign's job is to make her president right now. I don't like attacking her. The current campaign's plan of going after her as a flip-flopper is actually playing into their premise, because they'll just turn around and say, well, she's new, fresh, she's changed her mind. She had to do what Joe Biden wanted to do. They've demonstrated they'll throw Joe Biden completely under the bus, okay? If they have to blame the economy, everything on him and act like she had nothing to do with it, they will. You want to actually, don't give her, she's not a flip-flopper, she's a radical. She was the vice president. This is her record. She's not permitted to be a flip-flopper. She has to own the record of this administration. And so I think the Trump campaign needs to message her to the country as if she is president now, because that's the reason why the Democrats don't want her to be president until we vote, because they don't want the American people to see truly what it is they'd be voting for.
Well, you live in Iowa. I was born and raised there. We know a thing or two about presidential elections coming through our state, right? You see every single presidential candidate go through the state of Iowa. Kamala Harris in her campaign didn't even make it there.
Right.
Get back onto that. Say how unpopular she was before she was selected as the VP pick.
I agree wholeheartedly. And that goes to what I said earlier. I would not take her seriously as a candidate in any of my messaging. I'd point out this woman is so unelectable they didn't dare even let the delegates vote this afternoon. All right, they just removed a democratic process to make her the official nominee of the party, okay? This woman, and I would be saying, this woman is so unelectable, her own party doesn't want to even let their own delegates vote on her nomination, okay? She's not electable.
Leave nothing to chance in the Democratic Party.
Correct. But then you need to tether, or you need to connect or pivot to, and the reason she's unelectable is because of the poor record on issues of this administration. She's not a flip-flopper. She's a radical from a failed administration. And I just think on multiple levels, the Trump campaign is off message. And you know me, if I think Donald Trump's not walking the straight and narrow, I'll tell you. But in this case, I really believe it's the campaign's fault. The candidate is not omnipresent, can't be everything, can't, like the commercials when we were kids, Leon can't do everything, okay? He can't do it all right? And the campaign is way off message to the point that, I put on Twitter this morning, I'm concerned enough about this that if I were in the Trump family, forget advisors and everybody else. Advisors are with you because they are vested in an outcome with you. It's the family that ultimately matters, particularly when you've been as targeted as much as the Trump family has, okay? If I were the family this weekend, I'd be huddling together for some brutally honest conversations about, have we fully taken advantage of the most positive news cycle we are likely to get between now and the election? And if not, does that mean we don't have the people in place that can help us to do that? Because from what I see right now, either they don't have the people in place or those people need the support in order to do the jobs they were given, because we are off message on multiple fronts.
And it's going to be interesting to see if the economy and what's happening right now will actually force the Trump campaign to get back on message for that. When we come back, Blaze TV's James Polis predicts that the Democrats would call conservatives weird 3 years ago. He'll explain how he knew when we return. Earlier this week, we had a thorough discussion and explanation of the JD Vance is a weirdo meme. And the term weird is one of the latest insults hurled at conservatives by the left. And one person here at Blaze Media predicted that this would happen 3 years ago. So here to explain how he called it is James Polis, Blaze TV host of 0 Hour. James, one, thank you for filling in for me on Monday when I was out sick. But two, and more importantly, how did you predict that the leftists would label conservatives weirdos all the way back 3 years ago?
Good to see you, Jill. Welcome back. It all started when sometime around 2016, as Donald Trump was first making his splash on the scene, I realized that if I was going to be a real political theorist, like it said on my degree, I'd better figure out what was going on with technology. So fast forward a couple of years, and basically, what you learn if you go to Marshall McLuhan and Jacques Ellul and some of these other guys who saw it all coming in the 70s and 80s is that when we had this big transformation in the dominant technological communications medium, so that was from basically television, televisual media, to now digital, that's a big switch from an environment in which imagination is the most important or influential of our faculties to one where memory is more important. And so the twist is that now with digital, it's the memory of computers. It's the memory of machines. They have this power of recollection, of recall, that dwarfs even our own, but suddenly our memories matter a lot more than our fantasies. You know, anything that you tell a computer to do, it can kind of barf up an image of it, and that really makes the sort of mystique of the creative person not what it used to be. You know, you can look at Hollywood, you can look at the music industry. This is the thing that's happening. So back 3 years ago, what it was that I sort of put together and tweeted out back when it was Twitter was that the idea of weird that was dominant before digital came along was basically toast. And what we're going to see is a renaissance of this sort of idea of weird that goes all the way back to a sort of pre-modern world, because it's all the way back into the Middle Ages. That was the last time that memory mattered as much as it does now in the way that we think about things and experience life. And so if you go back to the 1400s, what you see the origin of the word weird, and that's W-Y-R-D, and that's weird Old English. And what that meant back then was having power over fate or destiny, having a kind of control or manifestation of what was to be. And so the bubbling up of that kind of idea, and if you go on Twitter now, X, you can see that people are making these jokes about J.D. Vance being this sort of man of destiny, going all the way back to the 1400s definition of weird. So there's a fight right now over what it means to be weird, and you've got yesterday's weirdos trying to present themselves as being the normal ones and attacking what, until yesterday were considered normal people as super duper weird.
Well, James, since I have Steve Deace sitting next to me, we're going to ask you to jump to the theology portion of the weird conversation.
Happy to. Yeah, I mean, look, it's if we're going back to the Middle Ages, theology was a lot more important back then. But so was, superstition was flourishing. There were all kinds of like weird occult stuff going on that ended up bubbling into the Holy Roman Empire during the 15th, 16th centuries, and alchemy, and John Dee, like the court astrologer, seer of Queen Elizabeth. So this stuff has a very old pedigree. But if you're going back to weird, you can think about Macbeth and the weird sisters, the witches. This fantasy, this fascination with knowing the future, with being able to read people's thoughts. This has long been associated with black magic, but it's also long been associated with sort of advanced technology. There's I think it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So this stuff's been going on for a long time. And I think, one of the things that you're seeing playing out on the right of center right now is you've got some people who think, Christianity is cooked. It's not coming back. Mm-hmm. It's too weak. We need to go back to kind of the old pagan virtue. And those folks are, really interested in talking about destiny and the man of destiny. Ralph Waldo Emerson called Napoleon the man of the world, that kind of great human figure in human history. But you've got a lot of folks on the right still who are like, no, actually Christianity can never be cooked. And so we shouldn't be obsessed with trying to understand, predict the future. We should focus right now on what's in our own hearts and what's in the present. This is an important debate, important conversation, and it's going to get more important, I think, as time goes on.
So, I mean, James, I'm a Theo nerd. I'm a Bible guy. I put the fun in fundamentalism. Okay, so this whole conversation that you're rolling with is speaking my love language, because I represent a worldview that has been called weird from the outset. I mean, the Romans called us cannibals for practicing communion or the Eucharist. We were called polytheist by the Muslims during the Crusades. Okay, the Puritans were considered weird even by their own Protestant brethren in the Church of England for thinking it was a bad idea to let the king determine what sermons could be preached on Sundays. This line of attack that you are articulating, even the idea of paganism and Gnosticism is kind of the other word that we're going for here with what you're describing. But this idea of attacking orthodoxy, whether religious, moral, philosophical, etc., that usually finds itself based in some form of revelation or Judeo-Christian worldview, the idea that the broader world or the pagan world would attack it as weird, as you're pointing out, this actually goes back to the very opening tenets of Christianity. It was weird, peculiar, odd. The fact these people don't make sacrifices to idols the way that we do and every other religion does. So what can you tell us about these historical cultural clashes and how the weird objective was eventually overcame?
Well, gosh, I mean, there's so much here, more than can possibly fit into one segment, unfortunately. As a capital O Orthodox Christian, I've got lots of feelings on this topic. I mean, I think one thing that I'd say kind of as a way to cut into this is I'm old enough to remember when there was another word for weird out there, and it was queer. And, that word has sort of become like this political football, and they're trying to like reclaim it and make it seem normal, normalize queerness. There's been a lot of that discourse going on, and I think what you see with wokeness as a whole, if I can paint with a broad brush, and then what you see with sort of the techies as a whole, also painting with a broad brush, is a kind of frustration with the given limits of our created human being. And so on the woke side, it's like perversity is actually good. Like you can have any gender you want. You can have more than one at any given time. Sex is just kind of this outlet for, creating and destroying identities and playing with it and, sort of Marquis de Sade stuff. And then what you have coming out of the tech side is, okay, humans are limited. We can do better. We need to kind of create the next phase in our evolution, and technology is going to be the thing that does that. In both cases, they're sort of looking at the given human body, the given human creation, and they're saying not good enough, even maybe a source of injustice or a source of, stagnation or nihilism. And these two powerful forces are different. Not all techies are sort of pervy wokes, although there are plenty in tech world if you want to, if you know how to find them. And then, of course, not all wokies are obsessed with technology, although I think they increasingly see that the only way that they can really take full control over this country is by seizing full control of tech. And that's why you get some conflict between tech and woke. But the two sort of big forces sort of converging on criticisms of the given human body, those things can be very mutually reinforcing. And so I think, Christians do have a wake-up call where it's like, look, you've got powerful fundamental attacks on the sacredness of the given human person coming from what the left is today, and then from much of what tech is today. And if Christians are going to do something about that and do something constructive, I think, they got to wise up, not just in terms of getting up to speed on what the latest and greatest is in tech. Some of that can be helpful, some of that less helpful. But really, again, just what you said, recognizing what it really means to not be of this world, but rather in this world. And when you are willing to take that step, and it fundamentally comes, I think, from the heart, not from the head, from courage, more than just sort of, trying to think really hard about stuff, then I think, they're going to get traction, and life in America is going to get a lot more interesting.
Would it be suffice to say, based on how you just answered my last question, that the dividing line is here that Christianity looks at human nature, or humanity, as a sacred creation, but human nature in and of itself as flawed and therefore in need of reconnection with its creator? Where the Gnostic or pagan world that you're describing does not see human nature or humanity as sacred, but sees humanity as flawed, doesn't even look necessarily at the sacredness of humanity in and of itself, but humanity is flawed and therefore they need a fixing, and they're the ones, of course, that are going to fix us.
Yes, it needs to be fixed by us in order to finally get beyond all the horrible things about being human. I mean, look, the Christian message is, not only were we created by an all-powerful God who's Lord of all things, but by a God who, loves us, who personally loves us, are the people we are individually that we have been created to be. And I'm sorry to say, nowadays in some ways that's a tough sell. There are a lot of people out there, no, I refuse to believe that God loves me. Well, maybe things just need to get a little bit worse in order for more people to really take that concept seriously again. But if you start thinking about it now, before things get really terrible, before you're sort of out on the street, or we're fighting Mad Max wars for cans of water or fresh apples, you don't have to wait that long. You can have that change of heart right now.
James, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely, thanks.
Yeah, he said yesterday's weirdos are today's establishment, Steve. That's what we have to look forward to. But yeah, I know you have to take off and run as well. But I really appreciate you coming on my show here,
Happy
Steve.
to do it. Anytime I'm in town, you let me know. You're doing a great job. And good to see another Iowan make it onto the big stage. So congrats.
We're taking over slowly but surely. When we come back, Glenn Beck's newest book is a New York Times bestseller. His co-author will tell us all about chasing embers next.
It should have been utopia, but instead it was madness.
It was blackout.
And distrust.
It was cheating and lying.
It was rioting and paranoia. America was dead.
And Topos killed it. This is where our story begins.
On a death-defying search for the truth about their past, two teenagers find themselves on the wrong side of the most powerful corporation the world has ever seen. They have one chance to start a new life, but it may cost them everything. Chasing Embers, the first young adult fiction novel from #1 best-selling author Glenn Beck. On sale now, everywhere books are sold.
That's right. Chasing Embers is the new young adult novel by Glenn Beck and Michaela Hedrick, and it's number 8 on the New York Times bestseller list for young adult novels. And Michaela, who is a staff writer for the Glenn Beck program, joins us now to talk about the book that they've called Part Hunger Games, Part Giver. So let's start from the beginning. How did this whole thing happen? How did Glenn bring you in to help write this book?
Well, first, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. The story is that every morning we have a meeting at 7:30 a.m., and that's when all the best ideas happen. I walked into the meeting, and Glenn and I just started chatting essentially about the state of storytelling. Storytelling has become so co-opted essentially by the diversity, equity, inclusion movement, by so many different political movements. It's become almost like propaganda. And we said, where are the good stories for young people? And from there, this world was born, and it's grown since.
And I've read the book, full disclosure. I absolutely love it. I'm one of the people that thinks that it is very much like the Hunger Games because you can see an entire world being built right away.
Yes, we did that on purpose. So as the series continues, God willing, you will find that in book 1, we set up so many secrets that are going to unfold through the rest of the series. It's very satisfying. The world is big enough to hold a whole series. And that was a feat to craft, but it's exciting, and I think the readers will be satisfied seeing that everything was planned.
And you guys wanted to incorporate history in the book. That's very obvious, that it's not just, okay, let me sit back and read this if I'm a young adult, but to actually teach them something without them even realizing that they're being taught something, if you will.
The #1 goal is that the story is good.
Yeah.
That's first. It has to move you. It has to engage your imagination. And then you're open to if there is a moral lesson that you can take from it. But what we did is we put the characters in situations where the past had all of the keys to unlock what they needed to know. It's often life or death, these stories from history. And so in that way, we're showing that what comes before you will influence where you go. It will change your life. If you're willing to learn about how people approach tough situations before, then your future becomes clearer. You know how to navigate it.
When you saw that you were on the New York Times bestseller list, what happened? What did you do? What went through your head?
Well, I was cooking dinner and I burnt it instantly. And I was so excited, and I was so grateful to the audience, the Glenn Beck audience, the greater audience that is coming behind this book and rallying behind it. But I think really it's because we're desperate for stories that aren't about identity. They're about who people are at their core. These people struggle. They have real lives, and that's what people connect to. We don't connect to someone because they look like us. We connect to them because they live like us, because they feel like us. And I think that the audiences to Chasing Embers are feeling that this is a real story, and it's something that you can commit yourself to emotionally, and you can trust us to take you on this journey.
It's incredible to see what you've been able to do. And for those of you who don't know, which is everybody that doesn't work at Blaze, Michaela is one of the nicest people here in the entire building. So this couldn't have happened to a better person.
Thank you. That is so sweet of you.
It's so true. Everybody in this building would say the same thing. So congratulations to you and Glenn on the book. And like we said, hopefully if it does well, like Glenn said, that it's going to be a series. So Chasing Embers, you can go get it now. Where can they pick it up, Michaela?
You can pick it up on glenbeck.com or wherever you get your books. Chasing Embers is out right now.
As an adult, I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. So you don't have to just be a young teen to enjoy this either. So thank you for taking some time on a Friday night to come chat with us.
Thank you. I love it.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on Blaze News Tonight. We'll see you back here on Monday.